Hello everyone and welcome to this brand new lecture in the Python programming course. In this particular lecture, we will see how to install Python in an operating system and also understand a bit about Python IDEs, that is, Integrated Development Environment. We'll see a bit about IDEs and go about installing one of the IDEs in Python. So let's get started. Let's see what all we'll be covering as part of this lecture. First of all, we'll go over how to install Python in an operating system. Next up, we will test whether our installation was successful or not. Then, we will see a bit about few of Python IDEs, that is Integrated Development Environment. And we will go about installing one such IDE, that is Jupyter Notebook. And finally, we'll get used to Jupyter Notebook by running a few instructions. So let's go about how to install Python in an operating system. We will first start with Windows. Even before we begin any installation process, we should make sure that Python is not installed already on the operating system. For this, we will open a command prompt window in Windows, which will look something like this. And then we will execute a command called python :version. Now this should give out the Python version in case it is already installed in the operating system. So something like this you can expect to see in case Python is already installed in the operating system, or if Python is not installed in the operating system, then this is something what you may expect to see in the command prompt as a result of this command execution. Now let's see what are the steps involved in Python installation on Windows. First of all, in order to download Python, we should be going to this particular URL in a browser window. Next up, we should be downloading the setup file which is specific to our operating system. In this case, it will be Windows. And finally, we should go and run the downloaded setup file in order to begin Python installation process and follow the on-screen instruction in order to complete the Python installation. So let's get going and install Python on a Windows machine. So here we are on a Windows machine and this is the desktop screen. Now as we learned earlier, we can first make sure that Python is not already installed on this operating system. In order to do that, we should go to the Start menu and open a command prompt window by typing cmd. In the command prompt window, as we read earlier, we can type in python :version, and the message we get signifies that Python is not already installed on this operating system. Let's close this command prompt window and then open a new browser window. We will go to the same website that we saw earlier, that was python.org/downloads. Now on this page, we need to look out for a suitable setup file with respect to our operating system. By the way, this page automatically detects our operating system and suggests us a suitable setup file. For example, as we can see, it detected that our operating system is Windows and it is suggesting the setup file for Windows to download Python 3.10.4, which seems to be the latest Python version for Windows. Let's go ahead and download the setup file for this latest Python version. The setup file for Python installation is downloaded, so let's begin the installation by executing this setup file. This is how the Python installation dialog box looks like. The first thing which we need to take care here is that add Python 3.10 to path variable. Now what is this path environment variable that we are talking about here? An environment variable is a dynamically named value that can affect the way a running process will behave on a computer. Path environment variable is an important security control that specifies the directories that needed to be searched in order to execute a command. So when we are adding Python 3.10 to the path environment variable, we are making it easier for the system to search the directories in order to execute a Python command. If we don't do it here, we'll have to go through a manual process in order to add the Python directory to the path environment variable. Now let's go ahead and check this particular option. Now if you see here, we have two options in order to install Python. The first one is a default install now button where we have a directory path which is specified. Now in this directory path, Python will be installed. That is what this is specifying here. We will talk more about this directory path shortly, but then there is another customize installation option. You can very well go ahead and proceed with the install now button. Just make a note of this directory path, whatever you see on the screen for yourself here. However, in order to have more control over the installation, I will go ahead with the customize installation part, and you can proceed with the same option too. In the customize installation, we can choose which optional feature do we want with this Python. So I will have all of them checked. Clicking on next, I will get advanced option. Now under this advanced option, here is the directory path which says customize install location. This is the directory path that I was talking about earlier. This is the same directory path that was appearing under default install now button in the earlier screen. So we can see that had we gone with the install now option, which was the first option in the initial screen while installing Python, Python would have got installed in this particular directory that you see on your screen. Now, as I mentioned earlier, this will be different with respect to your computer because you will be logged in with a different user account. This right here is the user account with which we are logged into the computer, and in my case, this is Ravi. So the directory path, as you can see, this is c/users/Ravi /appdata/local/programs/python/python310, which signifies Python 3.10.4. That is what we are installing. Now under the advanced option, as we get more clarity that this directory path happens to be in the case when we are installing only for a specific user and not for all the users. So had you gone with a default install now option, which we saw earlier, Python would have got installed only for you under this specific directory. But observe that what happens when I click on install for all users. The directory path changes. Now in this case, this is the path where Python will get installed and it will be available for all users on the computer. Either way, that is, whether you install it for all the users or install it only for a specific user, you can make a note of the directory path which displays here under this advanced option. Let's say, in case you are going with the default install now option, this is the directory path which displays here, just confirming by going back so that you can understand it better. As you can see, under the default install now option, this is the directory path. So now we understand that this will go and install it only for a specific user and not for all the users. So if you go with this default install now option, please make a note of this specific directory path, what you see for yourself on your computer screen while installing Python. Let's resume our process by going with the customize installation part. And as I said, in order to keep things simple, I will go ahead and install it for all the users on the computer. And I will make a note of the directory path which comes up here because this will be my Python installation location. There are several other options here, but as of now we don't need to worry about them. Now let's go ahead and install Python for Windows machine. So this particular setup bar shows you the progress of the installation. This will take a bit of time and then Python would successfully get installed on this particular machine. So this setup process went through several steps, and as we can see here, the setup was successful and Python is successfully installed on this system. Let's go ahead and close this window here. So we saw how we can install Python on a Windows machine. Now that we have seen how to install and set up Python in a Windows machine, let's move on further. Let's see how to achieve the same in Mac operating system. Mac operating system with version 10.8 and anything above that already come pre-installed with Python 2.7 version. What that means, if we open a Mac terminal, which is equivalent of a Windows command prompt and looks something like this. And if we type Python --version, that's the same command which we use to test the Python version in Windows, we will expect something like this. It will display the Python version as 2.7. Now, as a best practice, it is highly recommended to upgrade the Python version to 3 and above. And by the way, Python itself recommends the same. So, let's see how we can go about upgrading the Python version in a Mac operating system. The steps are, by the way, more or less similar to how we did it in Windows. First of all, in order to download Python 3, we should go to the same URL as we saw during the Windows installation. Next up, we'll go and download the setup file which will be specific to our operating system, in this case, which will be Mac operating system. And finally, we need to run the downloaded setup file. This is how we will be doing the same in Mac operating system. Going to the same URL, this is how the website page will look like for Mac operating system. This is pretty much same how it looked like for Windows, except that the operating system is now changed and the page automatically detects the same for us. The page suggests a suitable executable file with respect to the operating system, which in this case is Mac operating system. Upon clicking on download, the file gets downloaded and the executable file appears under the download folder in macOS. Upon executing this setup file, the installation process starts, and this is how the installation screen looks like. We just need to follow the on-screen instructions, which by the way are pretty simple, and finally we'll be able to successfully install Python on Mac operating system. Shall we move on further? Now that we have installed Python on Windows and Mac, let's go ahead and test on each of them. First of all, we'll start with Windows. We'll open the command prompt, which will again look like this. Now in command prompt, we'll type the same command, that's Python --version, and this time, since we have installed Python, we will get the Python version which is there in the system. We are here again on a desktop screen of a Windows machine. As discussed, let's go over the Windows menu and open a command prompt window. In the command prompt window, we can type in the command to check Python version, which will be Python --version. And as we can see, Python 3.10.4 is installed on this machine. This confirms that our installation was successful. So we confirm that our Python installation on the Windows machine was successful. Let's move on further. Similarly, in case of Mac, we can confirm that whether our Python installation that we did previously was successful or not. Again, in the Mac terminal, we can use the command Python --version. However, from Python 3, in Mac, the Python keyword has been replaced by Python 3 for any Python related command. This can be changed in the settings and we can still go on and use the Python keyword. However, to keep things simple, we'll be using Python 3 only. So, when we type Python 3 --version, we will be getting the Python 3 version that we upgraded on the Mac OS. Moving on, let's learn a bit about Python IDEs. Python IDEs, or Integrated Development Environments, are softwares for building applications that combine common developer tools into a single graphical user interface. Some of the common Python IDEs are PyCharm, Sublime Text, Atom, Jupyter Notebook, and Visual Studio Code Editor. Among all this, we will be proceeding with Jupyter Notebook. Jupyter Notebook is an open source web application that we can use to create and share documents that contain live code, equations, visualizations, and text. So here we learned about a few popular Python IDEs. Let's move on further. Let's see how can we install Jupyter Notebook. We'll start with Windows, and again in Windows we'll open the command prompt. Now in the command prompt, we will be logged in into our home directory by default. In my case, it will be C users Ravi. It will be different in your case depending on the account with which you are logged in into the Windows machine. Now, if you remember, At the time of Python installation, I asked you to make a note of the directory which shows up depending on for which option you go with the installation. Whether you go with the default install now option or under the customize option, whether you go with installation for all users or a single user. You can recollect that I mentioned the directory path where Python gets installed changes depending on if you install it for a single user or all the users on your machine. I will cover both the cases here, that if we install for a single user, how will we install Jupyter in that case? And in case if we install for all the users, that is if we have installed Python for all the users, how will we install Jupyter in that case? First of all, let's go ahead with the case where we have installed Python only for a specific user, that is for the user with which we are logged in into our Windows machine. So in this case, the directory structure that we have to change to looks something like this. Now, as we can see that this is a pretty long directory structure. Here, the username is a replaceable field. When I say a replaceable field or a replaceable part, what I mean that this part will look different for different users depending on the user account with which they are logged in into their system. In my case, this will look like Ravi because Ravi is the account with which I am logged in into my system. This is the directory path which would have showed up for me had I installed Python only for a specific user, that is Ravi, with which I am logged into my account. If you had made a note of this entire directory structure while installing Python for a specific user, which I had asked you to make a note, so you can directly paste this entire directory structure here and use the cd command to change to this directory. Or just to keep things simple and to make every one of us understand, I will use cd command to change to specific directories so things become pretty clear. First of all, I will change to the C directory using the cd command like this. So once I'm in the C directory, this is how the prompt will look like. Now I will change to the users directory. And once I'm in the users directory, now I will change to the directory of my user account with which I am logged in. In my case, it will be Ravi. In your case, it may be a different name. So once I am in the user account here, I will change to a directory called app data. After coming to the app data directory now, I will change to a directory called local. After that, once I'm in local directory, I will change to the programs directory using the cd command. After coming to the programs directory, I will then change to Python, and after coming to the Python directory, I will finally change to the Python 310 directory. Once I'm in Python 310 directory here, I will change to a specific directory called scripts. And this is where I have to execute a command to install the Jupyter notebook. When I'm in the scripts directory, I will execute the command called pip install Jupyter. There are spaces between pip, install and Jupyter. So there are three specific keywords here which we have to type and execute. Once I execute this particular command, this will start the installation for Jupyter Notebook on my Windows machine. Now that we have seen how to install Jupyter on a machine where I have installed Python for a specific user, let's go ahead and see the case when we have installed Python for all the users on our machine. We'll start with a fresh command prompt where we will be logged into our home directory by default. After this, we will change to the specific directory where Python was installed. Since I had installed it for all the users on my system, I had made a note of the directory path, copied that and pasted that in a notepad. The directory path happens to be C /program files /Python 310. And this is the directory path where Python was installed for all the users in my system. You can go ahead and change to each and every specific directory like I just showed in the previous part. However, since I had copied this entire directory structure in the notepad, I can directly paste it and use the cd command to change to this directory structure. So once I am in this directory, that is under Python 310, I will change to the specific directory called scripts. This is similar to what we did in the earlier part also, where after reaching the Python 3.10 directory, we changed to the specific directory called scripts. Once we are in scripts, this is where we have to execute the same command which we did earlier to install Jupyter. That is pip install Jupyter. Once we execute this specific command, this will start the installation for Jupyter Notebook on our Windows machine for the case where we have installed Python for all the users on our machine. Let's go ahead and see the installation for Jupyter in action. Now here we are on the desktop of a Windows machine again, and we have a command prompt window opened in front of us. We have opened this command prompt window using the Windows Start menu. As you can see, I have a notepad where I have noted down the directory structures for both the use cases, that is when I install Python for specific user on my machine and when I install Python for all the users on my machine. Since I went ahead and installed it for all the users on my machine, I will go ahead and copy this particular directory structure, go to the command prompt window and use cd command to change to this particular directory structure. Since I have copied it from Notepad, I can directly paste it here. Once I press enter, this will directly take me to that particular directory. Being in that particular directory, as we learnt earlier, now I will switch to another directory, that's scripts, using the cd command. Upon pressing enter, now I am in the scripts directory. Now when I am in the scripts directory, this is where I have to execute the command that we discussed about for installing Jupyter. The command was pip install Jupyter. Now I have typed the command, and as I press enter, this fires a script which begins the installation for Jupyter Notebook. So the installation went through several steps and finally it is done installing Jupyter Notebook. So we saw how we can install Jupyter Notebook on a Windows machine. Now after learning how to install Jupyter Notebook on a Windows machine, let's move ahead and see how we can achieve the same in a Mac operating system. In a Mac operating system, instead of a PIP, we have to just change it to PIP3, similarly how we changed Python to Python 3. So the command will become pip3 install Jupyter and it will execute the script which will install Jupyter on a Mac operating system. So here we saw how we can install Jupyter Notebook on a Mac operating system. Moving on, let's finally see how we can use Jupyter Notebook in order to write and execute code. In a Windows machine, in the command prompt, we have to type the command Jupyter Notebook. Now, be sure that you have typed this command in a directory where you want to create a new notebook. Basically, if you want to create a new notebook in another directory, you first have to change to that directory and then execute this particular command. Upon execution of this command, this will open up a new notebook in a new browser window or in a new tab of an existing browser window. Let's see this in action. We have a command prompt in front of us and what we'll do is use it to create a Jupyter Notebook. What I will do is use it to create the Jupyter Notebook in a very specific directory. So first I will change to that directory, and the next thing what I will do is type in the command Jupyter Notebook. Now this command will actually fire up or create a new notebook under this specific directory, and it will open that notebook in a new browser window. So as you can see, a new browser window has opened and my notebook has been created. In fact, this is the notebook list which is right now empty, and what I can do is create a new notebook using this new option, and we have the notebook in front of us. So I can use it to type a sample Python instruction, something like hello world, and use the run command, or run button I should say, and as you can see the hello world gets printed. Right now, I'm showing pretty simple instructions because we are yet to learn more topics in Python. What I wanted to show is how we can use this Jupyter Notebook in order to run our Python instructions. Basically, these single cells will be used to edit our Python code or Python instructions, and the run command or the run button at the top will be used to execute the code in a particular cell. And now that's how we'll be using the Jupyter Notebook. Now that we have seen how to use the Jupyter Notebook in a Windows machine in order to execute our code, let's move on and see how we can achieve the same in a Mac operating system. The command is exactly the same in a Mac operating system, where we will type Jupyter Notebook in a terminal, and this will open up a new notebook for us in a browser window where we can use it to execute our code. So we learned how we can use the Jupyter Notebook in a Windows and a Mac operating system, and that will be all for this lecture. Thank you.